Wade was 16 years old. He was 16 this last September. Just a great kid. I mean, he was just a pleasure to be around, and we had so much in common. I guess he was more like me than any of my other kids, but we loved to, hunt, fish, outdoors, just did everything together. And I guess, along with being my son, he was my best friend too. He and I were very close, and we just spent a lot of time together. Well, when you think about a 16-year-old, you don't really think they go that deep sometime with their thinking, but after the accident, we found out from the testimony of his friends and other kids there that, just how much he meant to them and what an impact he made on those around him. And that really opened my eyes. He was my son, and I knew what kind of person he was, but just the way everybody else looked at him was really something that I found out through all this, that, as you go through life every day, you don't realize the people you impact by your actions and just by the things you do and the way you handle yourself. But even at that young age, you do make an impact on people. I'm going to take you back. It was December the 7th is when this happened this last year, 2011. I was off work that day, and I was around the house just, piddling around doing some things there, and I was out in the yard, and I had my cell phone with me, and like I do every morning, I talked to Wade, before we went to school. And at 7:50, I think it was, we had talked, and just for a couple minutes before he left for school. And like we always do, we shared what was going to go on during the day, and and as I always do, we talked about what we were going to do that afternoon when he got out of school. And we talked for a few minutes, and knowing that he was going to be home that afternoon, and just a habit I've always had, and my family's always done this. We've always told each other that we love each other, no matter. My dad's 76 years old, and I still tell him I love him every time I see him. But to me, that's an important thing, with our family. But that particular morning, as we talked, it seemed different. I don't know what it was. I can't describe it. It wasn't something that I'd ever felt before. But as I hung up the phone, I was just thinking about, what a great kid he was, how respectful he was, and just the things that we had talked about. And as usual, I was looking forward to seeing him again that afternoon when he got out of school. That was about 7:50. And as time went by, the next 5, 10, 15 minutes, I was standing out in the yard, and my wife come running out, and she said, we need to go. Wade's been in an accident. Someone just called me and said, Wade's been in an accident. Of course, I immediately just panicked and just didn't know what to think, scared to death. But we jumped in our vehicle, and we knew where the accident was at. And just all the way to the accident, we were just trying to, just hoping and praying that he was okay. And it was just a little fender bender, and there wasn't anything really bad wrong. But it was about 5 miles from our house, and as I drove, I remember just thinking, about our conversation earlier, and just thinking about him and what kind of person he was. But as I got closer and turned, it's just a little 2-lane country road there where we live on the north end of the county. As I turned the corner, I saw fire trucks, ambulances, just emergency workers everywhere. And I was just, couldn't even breathe. I was so worried and scared, I guess. But, my first thought was to jump out and go help him. So I jump out of the truck, and I run up there to where he's at. And his truck was kind of blocked by the fire truck there that I couldn't see it. But when I got around the side of the truck where I could see, my heart just dropped. I mean, his truck had wrapped around an oak tree on the driver's side, and I couldn't see him anywhere. As I tried to get to the truck, my first thought was just go up there and get him out, like I've always done in the past. I had all these things flash through my mind that, from the time he's been in this world, I've always taken care of him, and he'd fall down and scrape his knee or skin an elbow. You grab him up and put a Band-Aid on it and tell him he's going to be okay. But this time I couldn't do that. I was pretty helpless. They wouldn't let me go to the truck. As I stood there and watched him, they had to take jaws of life to get him out of the truck. I still couldn't see him. I didn't know really what was going to happen, how bad he was hurt. But while I was standing there, I heard life flight coming in. And I knew with life flight being called, it was a pretty bad accident. And as they landed behind me, I was just panicking and didn't really know what to do, and just helpless, as I said. But After it seemed like forever, they finally got him out of the truck, and they put him on the stretcher there. And Wade was a neat dresser. I mean, he always wore everything just perfect, you know, and he had on a white polo shirt that morning. I'll never forget it. But I didn't see any blood anywhere. You know, I couldn't see where he was hurt. And I said, you know, maybe he's okay. And as they put him on the stretcher, I heard him gasp for breath. And I said, well, he's alive. You know, thank God he's alive. And I ran to the stretcher. And as I got to the stretcher, I could see that he had a severe head injury. You know, nothing else appeared to be hurt, but he had a severe head injury on the left side of his head. And they went ahead and put him in life flight and, you know, told us they were taking him to Sacred Heart Hospital. And we left, and, you know, we were 45 miles from Sacred Heart Hospital, and it seemed like an eternity to get there. As we drove, you know, we were both just all upset and crying and just praying that he'd be okay. And finally we got to the hospital, and by the time we got there, other family members had arrived, and the waiting room was just full of people. And they take me in and set us down in the waiting room there, in a little family waiting room, and we were waiting for some kind of news. And you know, finally, after what seemed like an hour or two, the door opened up, and you know, a doctor came in, a surgeon. He was in a surgical outfit, and he came in and asked, "Are you Mr. Jernigan?" And I said, "I am." And he closed the door behind him, and he said, "I've got some bad news for you," which I had the awful feeling already that it was going to be bad because of the injury that I saw. He said, "Your son's brain dead." He said, "There's nothing we can do for him." He said he has severe head trauma, and it's something that we can't fix. You know, and I was just sitting there just hearing those words, and it just ripped through my heart, ripped through my mind, and all I could think about was all the time that we shared, and you know, all the baseball games, hunting trips, fishing trips, all the good times he and I had, the conversations. And I just couldn't believe this was happening to me and my family. It's something you hear that happens to somebody else, you know. After a little while, they told me that I could go back and see him. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done is to go back and to see my son in the shape he was in. You know, he had made a decision. He'd only been driving for a few months, and I've always stressed the importance of safety in driving. You know, coming from the power company and spending so many years here and in safety and trying to keep people safe just like you do, that was a priority with my family too. You know, I'd taken him out, you know, over the years and taught him how to drive, taught him how to do the things he needs to do on the road, put him in situations on some of these backcountry roads to, you know, figure out what would I do if this happened. Just sort of like our Smith defensive driving, you know, just those points and ideas about driving. I knew he was a good driver. I trusted him driving. He drove me all over the world, you know, during his few years of driving. And I couldn't figure out, you know, what had happened. The trooper had told us that he had probably doing around 40 miles an hour at the time of impact. And I went back and looked at the situation, looked at the road. You know, there were no skid marks. There were nothing I could see, you know, visibly wrong there. You know, I wondered, had a deer run out in front of him because it was back out in the country? Had someone met him on the road and run him off the road? I couldn't figure it out. So it just really bothered me, not only losing my son, but trying to figure out what happened. So that was in my mind. And at the same time, Wade had decided to be an organ donor when he signed up for his license, because I was. Again, he was following my lead on something and, you know, doing what Dad did. And we had in our family some of that situation to need organ donation, so we both were really supported that. But I never dreamed in my wildest dreams that I'd be standing there trying to honor his wishes about being an organ donor. And what they told me was that he only had a head injury, that everything else on his body was fine. None of his major organs were injured, so, you know, he was just a perfect person for donation. So we made that decision. That was a hard one, and that took us another day in the hospital waiting for them to place his major organs. They have to place them with people that need them, and you know, to make a long story short on that, he ended up saving 6 lives with his major organs, and we know the people that he donated to, and have had contact with some of them already, and there's been people that just would not have lived without the organs that Wade donated. So that helped us somewhat, still grieving. But after we got home, after the funeral and after everything was over with, I still was just very puzzled about what happened. I've always had to know what happened when there's an accident, or I guess from accident investigations and trying to get to the bottom of everything. And I decided, one night I was sitting there at midnight just thinking about the whole thing, what could have happened. I went back and I said, his phone. I went back and he had a phone service, AT&T, that we could actually go back and pull his records and look at them online and look at all the texts, look at all the phone calls. So I pulled his records that night. And as I sat there and went through the records, I saw what was my worst nightmare, I think, as to what could have happened to him. I saw where I talked to him at 7:50 that morning. I knew he left for school about 8:05. About 8:05, 8:06, he started texting. And he texted from 8:05 to 8:17, back and forth with several of his friends. And I knew he had to be driving and texting. Something that I'm ashamed to say that he's seen me do over the years. We've all got a culture now of we think we've got to answer that BlackBerry, that iPhone when it goes off, and maybe something important, but it turns out that a text message is not that important to us. A telephone call, something we can't wait to take. But I looked at it and I saw that at 8:17 he texted out. Then at 8:18, the person on the other end texts back, no answer. Text back again, no answer. Several times he was text back. So that tells me from looking at the records that at 8:17 is the time of his accident. He was texting and driving. I went back again and looked at the scene and talked with the trooper, which is a friend of mine. He told me that exactly what happened, that he left the road, ran off the road a couple of feet, came back on the road, fishtailed a couple of times, and then it lost control of the vehicle. He overcorrected and slid into the oak tree, the only oak tree on that side of the road for a mile. He slid into it on his side, right in the driver's door, and that's what caused his head trauma. So the whole thing, ends up that, that I've lost one of the most precious things in the world to me, my son. And I look back and it was the root cause of that accident was his texting and driving. And that's the message I'm trying to get everybody that I see. We all do it, and I know that Gulf Power Company is, it's a federal law now not to text and drive for commercial motor vehicles. And it's so important that we talk to our families and talk to our kids and and even ourselves, and be more observant to what we're doing driving, because it wasn't his driving skills. He had great driving skills, but none of us can drive and be distracted. And I know that's what's happened to Wade, and why he's not here with me today was his texting and driving. I just want everybody to understand just how important it is to tell your kids and tell your family the safety of driving and what can happen. I don't want anybody else in this world to go through what I and my family have been through in the past 70 days and have the pain and agony that I've gone through, and just knowing that it was something so simple that caused him not to be here anymore. So that kind of sums up what happened. And it's been, like I said, about 70 days now, and we're still having a lot of problems getting used to the fact that he's not going to walk in the door anymore, and he's not going to be there at night. He's not going to be with me when I go somewhere, or I'm not going to call him or talk to him. And it's just a great loss of a great person that is really hard to understand, but we're trying to cope with that and trying to go on with our life right now.